They never imagined that a respected British diplomat, whose charm and intellect had won the trust of both allies and adversaries alike, would turn out to be one of the most dangerous Soviet moles of the Cold War. As the tension between East and West escalated, the delicate fabric of international cooperation began to fray, revealing the hidden vulnerabilities within the intelligence communities of Britain and the United States. Kim Philby, a key figure in the infamous Cambridge Five, navigated the labyrinthine corridors of MI6 while secretly serving the very ideology he was sworn to combat. His duplicity would not only shake the foundations of the Anglo-American alliance, but also expose the fragility of loyalty in a world where espionage was a deadly game played in the shadows. The early years of the Cold War bore witness to a landscape riddled with suspicion and veiled threats, a period where trust between allies was both a necessity and a glaring vulnerability. The geopolitical tension between the Western Bloc and the Soviet Union was escalating rapidly, and intelligence agencies found themselves locked in a covert battle that would define global security for decades. Among the shadows of this clandestine struggle emerged a figure whose duplicity would shake the foundations of Allied trust: Kim Philby. Kim Philby was no ordinary intelligence officer. Operating within the corridors of British intelligence, he was a man celebrated for his suave demeanor, unassailable credentials, and an impeccable reputation forged through years of dedicated service. Yet beneath this polished exterior lay a secret allegiance that would come to symbolize the fragility of loyalty during the Cold War. His role as a Soviet mole was not merely a personal betrayal, but a strategic catastrophe that reverberated across the intelligence communities of both Britain and the United States. The story of Philby is inextricably linked with the infamous Cambridge Five spy ring, a cadre of British double agents whose infiltration into the highest echelons of British intelligence would become one of the most sensational espionage scandals of the 20th century. This group, comprising individuals recruited from the elite circles of Cambridge University during the 1930s, embodied the ideological battle lines of the era. Their commitment to communism, nurtured in the intellectual ferment of their youth, ultimately led them to betray their country and serve the Soviet intelligence apparatus with chilling effectiveness. For American intelligence agencies, the discovery of Philby's true identity was a profound shock. The United States had placed unwavering trust in its British counterparts, relying heavily on the close cooperation between MI6 and the CIA to counter Soviet espionage. Philby's position as a trusted liaison officer had allowed him unparalleled access to sensitive information, particularly intelligence shared between the two nations. To find that this key figure was a Soviet asset sent ripples through the intelligence community, exposing vulnerabilities that were previously unimagined and igniting a crisis of confidence that would take years to mend. The early Cold War era was marked by a precarious balance of power, in which intelligence sharing was both a weapon and a risk. The British-American alliance was foundational to Western efforts to contain Soviet expansion, and their joint operations depended on a high degree of mutual trust. Philby's infiltration was not just an act of espionage, it was a strategic blow that undermined this alliance at a critical juncture. The fact that the Soviet Union had managed to embed an agent so deeply within British intelligence was a testament to the sophistication of Soviet tradecraft and a stark warning of the dangers lurking within Allied ranks. Kim Philby's story begins in the hallowed halls of Cambridge University in the 1930s, where his recruitment into Soviet espionage took root. It was an era when the allure of communism attracted many young intellectuals dissatisfied with the status quo, convinced that Soviet ideals offered a path to a more just world. Philby, along with his compatriots who would form the Cambridge Five, was drawn into a clandestine network that operated with remarkable secrecy and discipline. Their mission was clear: to infiltrate the British establishment and funnel critical intelligence to Moscow. The Cambridge Five were not mere opportunists. They were ideologues driven by conviction. This ideological motivation made their betrayal all the more poignant and dangerous. Unlike spies motivated solely by money or coercion, these agents believed they were serving a higher cause. They saw themselves as agents of history, working to bring about a global revolution. This conviction granted them a resilience and cunning that confounded counterintelligence efforts for years. Philby's ascent through the ranks of British intelligence was meteoric. His charm, intellect, and impeccable social standing made him an ideal candidate for sensitive assignments. By the late 1940s and into the 1950s, he occupied a pivotal role within MI6, tasked with liaising with American intelligence agencies. It was during this period that he gained access to some of the most closely guarded secrets of the Western Alliance, including information about covert operations and the identities of agents in the field. The strategic importance of Philby's position cannot be overstated. As the Cold War intensified, the flow of intelligence between Britain and the United States was a vital lifeline for joint operations against the Soviet bloc. Philby's diplomatic status and trusted role allowed him to operate with near-total impunity. His ability to mask his true allegiance was aided by the British intelligence system's reliance on class and character judgments, which blinded many to the possibility of betrayal from within. For American intelligence, the collaboration with British MI6 was both a source of strength and inadvertently a critical weakness. The seamless exchange of intelligence was predicated on a shared commitment to security and mutual respect. Philby's role as a central conduit in this alliance meant that vast amounts of sensitive information passed through his hands. The Americans, unaware of the Soviet mole in their midst, placed immense trust in British intelligence officers like Philby, viewing them as reliable partners in the global struggle against communism. Yet beneath this veneer of cooperation, subtle signs began to emerge, whispers of inconsistencies, unexplained leaks, and operational failures that suggested the presence of a mole. These suspicions, however, were difficult to act upon. Philby's diplomatic immunity and sterling reputation rendered him nearly untouchable within British intelligence circles. The challenge of confirming his duplicity was exacerbated by the sophisticated tradecraft employed by Soviet intelligence, designed to shield their agents from detection. The early Cold War years thus unfolded as a tense dance of shadows and half-truths. Philby's ability to navigate this treacherous terrain, exploiting the trust placed in him, made him one of the most effective Soviet assets of the era. His betrayal was not only a personal act of treason, but a strategic undermining of Western intelligence efforts at a moment when unity was paramount. In retrospect, the revelation of Kim Philby as a Soviet mole forced a reckoning within American and British intelligence communities. It exposed fundamental weaknesses in vetting procedures and highlighted the dangers inherent in ideological subversion. The shock waves from this discovery disrupted the intimate intelligence-sharing relationship that had been cultivated with painstaking effort, ushering in an era marked by increased suspicion and more rigorous counterintelligence measures. As the Cold War deepened, the story of Kim Philby and the Cambridge Five became emblematic of the precarious nature of espionage alliances. Their saga underscored a bitter truth. In the realm of intelligence, trust is a fragile and dangerous commodity. The Americans had placed their faith in a British ally, only to find that faith exploited by a Soviet mole who had walked undetected within their ranks for years. This chapter of Cold War history remains a stark reminder of the complex interplay between ideology, loyalty, and deceit, a narrative of espionage that continues to captivate and caution intelligence practitioners and historians alike. The early Cold War era, with its high stakes and hidden battles, set the stage for a drama of betrayal that would resonate far beyond the secret corridors of MI6 and the CIA. Kim Philby's path to becoming one of the most notorious Soviet moles in British intelligence was forged long before the Cold War cast its shadow across the world. His story begins in the intellectual crucible of Cambridge University during the tumultuous 1930s, a period when the allure of communism captivated many young British elites, disillusioned by the failures of capitalism and the rise of fascism in Europe. It was within this environment that a clandestine network of spies began to take shape, an ideological brotherhood that would later be known as the Cambridge Five. Philby's early life was marked by privilege and promise. Born into a family with a history of service and intellectual achievement, he was groomed from an early age for a career in the establishment. His education at Westminster School and later at Trinity College, Cambridge, positioned him among Britain's elite, a breeding ground for the nation's future leaders. Yet beneath his polished exterior, Philby nurtured radical political beliefs that set him on a collision course with his own country. At Cambridge, Philby became part of a secret circle of students who shared a commitment to Marxist ideals and a conviction that the Soviet Union represented the vanguard of a global revolutionary movement. This group included figures such as Guy Burgess, Donald Maclean, Anthony Blunt, and John Cairncross, names that would resonate ominously in the annals of espionage history. The Cambridge Five were not merely spies, they were ideological warriors, united by a belief that their actions would hasten the demise of imperialism and usher in a new era of social justice. The recruitment of Philby and his compatriots into Soviet intelligence was a carefully orchestrated process. Soviet operatives recognized the unique opportunity presented by these well-placed young men, whose social standing and future careers promised access to the highest levels of British government. The ideological zeal of the Cambridge Five made them willing and reliable assets, capable of operating under deep cover for decades. Their infiltration into British intelligence was methodical and strategic. Initially occupying relatively low-profile positions, they gradually climbed the ranks, leveraging their education, social connections, and impeccable manners to mask their true intentions. The Cambridge Five's ability to blend seamlessly into the British establishment was a testament to their training and their deep understanding of the social fabric they sought to penetrate. Philby, in particular, distinguished himself through a combination of charm, intelligence, and an uncanny ability to navigate the complex world of intelligence work. His recruitment into MI6, the British Secret Intelligence Service, was swift and unremarkable on the surface. Yet behind the scenes, he was already an agent of the Soviet Union, tasked with funneling critical information to Moscow while maintaining the facade of a loyal British officer. The ideological motivations behind the Cambridge Five's betrayal cannot be overstated. Unlike many spies who operate out of greed or coercion, these men viewed their espionage as a moral imperative. Their commitment to communism was not a mere political stance, but a deeply held conviction that justified the risks they took and the lives they endangered. This ideological fervor made them extraordinarily difficult to detect and even harder to turn. The operation of the Cambridge Five was marked by remarkable discipline and secrecy. They communicated with their Soviet handlers through clandestine channels, using coded messages and dead drops to transmit intelligence. Their actions were coordinated to maximize damage to British and American interests while minimizing suspicion within their own agencies. Over time, the information they funneled to Moscow helped the Soviet Union anticipate Western strategies and avoid countless intelligence traps. Philby's role within this network was particularly significant. His ability to rise through the ranks of British intelligence while simultaneously serving Soviet interests was a masterclass in deception. He cultivated relationships with key figures in both MI6 and the CIA, positioning himself as a linchpin in the Anglo-American intelligence alliance. This duality allowed him to access a wealth of classified information, much of which was relayed directly to the Soviets, often undermining Western operations before they even began. The ideological dimension of Philby and the Cambridge Five's espionage also reflected the broader tensions of the era. Their betrayal was not simply a matter of espionage, it was a manifestation of the ideological warfare that defined the 20th century. For them, loyalty to the Soviet cause transcended national allegiance, creating a profound conflict between personal belief and institutional duty. This ideological schism would haunt British intelligence for years to come, complicating efforts to root out Soviet moles and rebuild trust. The Cambridge Five's infiltration extended beyond mere espionage. It permeated the cultural and political fabric of British society. Their presence within the establishment challenged assumptions about class, loyalty, and identity. The fact that these spies emerged from the very institutions that shaped Britain's ruling elite was a source of particular embarrassment and outrage, fueling intense public scrutiny and political fallout once their activities were revealed. Philby's own trajectory exemplified this paradox. A man of refined tastes and impeccable manners, he epitomized the British gentleman spy archetype, yet he was simultaneously a devoted agent of the Soviet Union. His ability to maintain this dual identity was a testament to his skill and the cunning of Soviet intelligence, which exploited the British class system's blind spots and overconfidence. The Cambridge Five's ideological commitment also translated into a long-term strategy of infiltration and influence. They were not content with mere espionage. Their goal was to shape the course of history by undermining Western governments from within. This strategic vision made their activities particularly dangerous, as it blurred the lines between intelligence gathering and political subversion. In the broader context of Cold War espionage, the Cambridge Five represented a unique and formidable challenge. Their deep ideological conviction and social integration made them elusive targets for counterintelligence. British intelligence agencies struggled for years to uncover the full extent of their activities, hampered by internal divisions and a reluctance to confront the uncomfortable implications of their betrayal. Kim Philby's early recruitment and the formation of the Cambridge Five thus stand as a pivotal chapter in Cold War history. They illustrate how ideology can serve as both a motivator and a shield for espionage, enabling agents to operate under deep cover for extended periods. More importantly, their story reveals the vulnerabilities inherent in intelligence systems that rely heavily on trust, social pedigree, and conventional assumptions about loyalty. As the Cold War unfolded, the legacy of the Cambridge Five would cast a long shadow over British intelligence. Their betrayal forced a fundamental reassessment of recruitment, vetting, and counterintelligence practices. It also underscored the enduring challenge posed by ideological subversion, a threat that continues to shape intelligence operations to this day. The tale of Kim Philby and the Cambridge Five is not merely a narrative of espionage, it is a profound exploration of the collision between personal conviction and national allegiance. Their journey from idealistic students to Soviet moles embodies the complex realities of Cold War espionage, where the battle for hearts and minds was waged as fiercely as any armed conflict. In this crucible of ideology and deception, the Cambridge Five emerged as one of the most enduring and consequential spy rings in modern history. Kim Philby's rise within British intelligence was nothing short of meteoric, a trajectory that would ultimately grant him unparalleled access to the innermost secrets of the West's covert operations. His ascent was not merely a product of personal ambition or social connections. It was a deliberate and carefully orchestrated path that enabled him to operate as a Soviet mole at the very heart of MI6. Understanding Philby's rise is essential to grasping the magnitude of his betrayal and the vulnerabilities it exposed within British, and by extension, American intelligence. Having secured a position within MI6 in the late 1930s, Philby quickly demonstrated a combination of intellectual acumen and social finesse that endeared him to his superiors and peers alike. His charm was disarming, his demeanor impeccably British, a gentleman spy in the classical mold. This persona afforded him an aura of trustworthiness in a world where suspicion was both a survival tool and a professional hazard. His superiors saw in him the ideal officer, discreet, capable, and deeply embedded within the establishment. By the late 1940s, Philby had ascended to a rank where he was entrusted with significant operational responsibilities. His expertise spanned multiple theaters of intelligence work, from counter-espionage to liaison duties with allied agencies. What set Philby apart, however, was his appointment as a principal liaison officer to American intelligence. This role placed him at the nexus of Anglo-American cooperation during the formative years of the Cold War, granting him a vantage point from which he could observe and influence the flow of sensitive information. Philby's diplomatic status, achieved through postings in British embassies abroad, further insulated him from scrutiny. Diplomatic immunity afforded him protections that complicated any attempts at formal investigation. His position in embassies, notably in Washington, D.C., enabled him to cultivate relationships with key figures in the CIA and other American agencies. To his American counterparts, Philby was the epitome of reliability, a bridge between two great powers united against a common enemy. The trust vested in Philby was profound. American agents often regarded him as a gatekeeper to British intelligence, a man whose word was beyond reproach. His role as a conduit for intelligence sharing meant that he was privy to some of the most classified and strategically vital information of the era. Details of covert operations, the identities of agents working behind the Iron Curtain, and plans for countering Soviet advances were routinely passed through Philby's hands. Yet, this very access was a double-edged sword. Philby's allegiance to the Soviet Union turned the trust placed in him into a weapon against his own country and its allies. His ability to siphon information directly to Moscow compromised operations and endangered lives. Soviet intelligence benefited enormously from the insights he provided, often staying steps ahead of Western strategies. Philby's diplomatic cover was key to his operational success. His postings in embassies allowed him to move within high diplomatic circles, attend social functions, and interact with senior officials without arousing suspicion. The veneer of diplomacy masked a deeper, more sinister role. This dual identity required extraordinary skill. Philby had to balance the demands of his official duties with the secret imperatives of espionage, all while maintaining the facade of a loyal British officer. His ascent was also facilitated by the British intelligence system's reliance on social pedigree and character assessments criteria that, in hindsight, proved disastrously inadequate. The British establishment's deference to class and background blinded many to the possibility that someone of Philby's stature could be a traitor. His Cambridge education and gentlemanly manners served as a shield, deflecting the growing suspicions that would eventually surface. Within MI6, Philby was regarded as a consummate professional. He was meticulous in his work, respected by colleagues, and often called upon to mentor junior officers. His apparent dedication to the cause of British intelligence made the eventual revelation of his duplicity all the more shocking. The very qualities that made him effective as an officer, his discretion, his intelligence, his affability, also made him a formidable adversary for counterintelligence. Philby's access extended beyond British intelligence. His liaison role involved coordinating joint operations with the CIA and other Western agencies, making him a central figure in the broader Western intelligence apparatus. This position allowed him to influence not only the flow of information, but also the strategic direction of cooperative efforts against the Soviet threat. The scope of Philby's influence became particularly significant during pivotal moments of the Cold War. His tenure coincided with key events such as the Berlin blockade, the Korean War, and the early stages of the nuclear arms race. In each case, the intelligence he relayed to the Soviets provided them with critical insights into Western plans and capabilities, often neutralizing the element of surprise that is so vital in espionage and military strategy. Philby's ability to mask his true allegiance was aided by his skillful manipulation of intelligence protocols. He was adept at compartmentalizing information, controlling the flow of intelligence to suit his purposes, and exploiting bureaucratic inertia within MI6. His position allowed him to vet and sometimes suppress information that might have exposed his activities, buying time for the Soviet intelligence apparatus to capitalize on the intelligence he provided. The diplomatic immunity he enjoyed also meant that suspicions raised against him within British intelligence met with institutional resistance. Attempts to investigate or surveil Philby were hampered by the potential diplomatic fallout such actions could provoke. This institutional hesitancy enabled Philby to operate in a relative cloak of invulnerability, prolonging his espionage activities. For the Americans, Philby was the quintessential ally. His presence in Washington was a symbol of the close collaboration between MI6 and the CIA. Philby's detailed knowledge of British intelligence operations and his access to American plans made him an invaluable source, one trusted implicitly by many senior CIA officers. The extent of this trust would later be revealed as a critical vulnerability as Philby's information leaks compromised numerous operations. Philby's dual role as a British intelligence officer and Soviet agent encapsulated the perilous nature of espionage during the Cold War. His rise within MI6 was not just a personal success story, but a cautionary tale about the dangers of misplaced trust and the limits of institutional oversight. The very structures designed to protect national security were, in Philby's case, exploited to devastating effect. In sum, Kim Philby's ascent through the ranks of British intelligence was a masterstroke of espionage tradecraft. His diplomatic status, combined with his position as a liaison to American agencies, placed him at the epicenter of Western intelligence during the early Cold War. This privileged access allowed him to betray his country and its allies with devastating consequences, undermining Western efforts to counter Soviet influence and exposing critical flaws in intelligence vetting and cooperation. Philby's story during this period is a stark reminder that in the shadowed world of espionage, appearances can be deceiving, and the greatest threats often come from within. His ability to navigate the corridors of British power while secretly serving Soviet interests underscores the complexity and danger at the heart of Cold War intelligence, a world where loyalty was a fragile and dangerous commodity, and where the cost of betrayal was immeasurable. The collaboration between British MI6 and American intelligence agencies during the early Cold War was marked by an unprecedented level of trust and cooperation, a partnership forged in the crucible of shared strategic imperatives. At the heart of this alliance stood Kim Philby, a figure regarded by both sides as a linchpin in the delicate web of intelligence exchange. The Americans, in particular, placed immense faith in their British counterparts, viewing them as indispensable allies in the global struggle against Soviet expansionism. Philby's role as a trusted intermediary not only facilitated this cooperation, but, as later revealed, became a conduit for betrayal of the highest order. From the outset, the Anglo-American intelligence relationship was envisioned as a seamless partnership, with British and American agencies pooling resources, sharing information, and coordinating operations against the Soviet bloc. This collaboration was essential in an era defined by ideological confrontation and the constant threat of nuclear escalation. MI6 and the CIA operated under the assumption that unity and openness between allies were paramount to countering the sophisticated espionage efforts mounted by the Soviets. Philby's position within this framework was pivotal. As a senior liaison officer, he was responsible for the flow of intelligence between MI6 and the CIA, often acting as the primary channel through which sensitive information was exchanged. His diplomatic postings, particularly in Washington, afforded him direct access to American intelligence officials, enabling him to shape joint operations and influence strategic decisions. To the Americans, Philby was the embodiment of British reliability, a man whose insights and assessments carried significant weight. The depth of American reliance on British intelligence during this period cannot be overstated. The fledgling CIA, still organizing its structure and operational capabilities, leaned heavily on the experience, and established networks of MI6. British intelligence officers like Philby were often seen as mentors and gatekeepers, their expertise guiding the nascent American agency through the complexities of Cold War espionage. This dynamic created a relationship characterized by deference and trust, one that Philby exploited with devastating efficiency. Philby's role as a trusted intermediary extended beyond mere information exchange. He was actively involved in shaping joint intelligence operations, advising on strategy, and coordinating efforts to infiltrate Soviet networks. His knowledge of both British and American methods made him invaluable in synchronizing covert activities, from surveillance and counterintelligence to clandestine sabotage. The Americans regarded him not only as a source of intelligence, but as a partner in the intellectual and operational challenges posed by the Soviet threat. This close cooperation, however, also rendered American intelligence agencies susceptible to the vulnerabilities inherent in British intelligence's internal security. Philby's access to American operations meant that the Soviets, through their mole, gained insight into not only British, but also American plans and agents. The Americans unwittingly became second-order victims of Philby's duplicity, their trust in British intelligence exploited to devastating effect. The Americans' faith in Philby was reinforced by his cultivated image as a consummate professional and a gentleman spy. His demeanor, polished and urbane, aligned perfectly with the expectations of British officers operating in diplomatic circles. This persona engendered confidence among CIA operatives, many of whom had little reason to suspect that such a figure could be a Soviet agent. The notion of betrayal by a trusted ally was, at the time, almost unthinkable, a psychological barrier that delayed suspicion and investigation. In practical terms, Philby's role facilitated the transfer of highly sensitive intelligence that directly influenced American operational decisions. Information about Soviet capabilities, espionage penetrations, and strategic intentions flowed through Philby's hands. His ability to vet, manipulate, or withhold intelligence allowed him to control the narrative presented to American counterparts, subtly steering perceptions and operational priorities in ways that favored Soviet interests. The operational consequences of this betrayal were profound. Numerous covert missions were compromised, agents were exposed, and strategic advantages lost as a result of intelligence leaks that traced back to Philby's duplicity. The Americans, who had invested heavily in building an effective counterintelligence apparatus, were blindsided by the realization that their British partner harbored a mole with unfettered access to their secrets. Despite this, the early years of the alliance were characterized by optimism and a sense of shared purpose. The CIA and MI6 officers worked side by side, pooling expertise and resources to combat the Soviet threat. Philby's role as a trusted liaison was integral to this process. He participated in high-level meetings, contributed to strategic assessments, and was often the recipient of the most sensitive intelligence the Americans possessed. This level of access was rare and underscored the depth of trust placed in him. However, the very openness that defined the Anglo-American intelligence relationship was exploited by Philby to devastating effect. The Americans' reliance on British vetting and security procedures that failed to detect Philby's true allegiance, proved to be a critical vulnerability. The implicit assumption that British officers were beyond suspicion bred complacency, allowing Philby to operate with near impunity for years. The Americans' trust in Philby also reflected broader cultural factors. The shared language, history, and institutional parallels between MI6 and the CIA fostered a sense of kinship and mutual respect. This cultural affinity made the betrayal all the more bitter and disorienting when it was finally uncovered. The shockwaves reverberated not just through intelligence circles, but also through diplomatic channels, straining the Anglo-American alliance at a delicate moment. Philby's role as a trusted intermediary was thus both a testament to the strength of Anglo-American cooperation and a glaring example of its Achilles heel. His duplicity demonstrated how the very structures designed to promote openness and collaboration could be turned against the West by a skilled and ideologically driven mole. For the Americans, the experience was a harsh lesson in the complexities and dangers of intelligence partnerships. The revelation of Philby's betrayal forced a re-evaluation of the entire intelligence sharing paradigm between Britain and the United States. Vetting procedures were overhauled, information exchanges became more guarded, and a new culture of suspicion seeped into the alliance. The Americans, once unreserved in their trust of British intelligence, adopted a more cautious and skeptical stance, a shift that would shape Cold War intelligence cooperation for decades. Yet despite the damage, the partnership between MI6 and the CIA endured, adapting to the realities exposed by Philby's treachery. The foundation of shared strategic goals and mutual dependence remained intact, but tempered by a heightened awareness of the risks posed by infiltration and betrayal. Philby's role as a trusted intermediary became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the closest alliances require vigilance and rigorous counterintelligence measures. In the final analysis, Kim Philby's tenure as a liaison officer epitomized both the possibilities and perils of intelligence cooperation. His trusted position allowed him to facilitate an unprecedented level of Anglo-American collaboration, while simultaneously enabling one of the most damaging penetrations in Western intelligence history. The Americans had placed unwavering trust in their British ally, unaware that a Soviet mole lurked within their ranks, turning that trust into an instrument of espionage that would reverberate throughout the Cold War. As the Cold War deepened, subtle fissures began to emerge within the tightly woven fabric of Anglo-American intelligence cooperation. Whispers of distrust and unease surfaced in response to a series of operational failures and unexplained leaks that hinted at a mole embedded within the highest ranks of British intelligence. For the Americans, the notion that one of their most trusted British counterparts might be a Soviet agent was almost unthinkable. Yet the signs of betrayal were too persistent to ignore, prompting a cautious and painstaking investigation that would eventually unveil the unsettling truth about Kim Philby. The earliest hints of suspicion were often elusive and circumstantial, a pattern of compromised operations, lost assets, and intelligence anomalies that defied explanation. These incidents, while individually ambiguous, collectively suggested the presence of a leak with unprecedented access. American and British counterintelligence officers grappled with the grim reality that their closely guarded secrets were being funneled to Moscow, undermining years of painstaking work. Internal doubts began to crystallize within both intelligence communities. In Washington, some CIA officers noted inconsistencies in the flow of information and questioned the accuracy of reports filtered through Philby. British officials, too, harbored suspicions, but the institutional culture within MI6, steeped in tradition and deference, rendered action difficult. The idea that a man of Philby pedigree and standing could be a traitor challenged deeply held assumptions about loyalty and class. Investigations into Philby's activities were fraught with complexity. His diplomatic status provided a formidable shield, as he was protected by immunities that complicated surveillance and interrogation efforts. Moreover, the dense web of personal relationships and social ties Philby had cultivated within the intelligence community created a network of implicit trust that was difficult to penetrate. Those who raised doubts risked professional ostracism or accusations of paranoia. Specific incidents heightened suspicions. One such episode involved the abrupt collapse of a covert operation aimed at penetrating Soviet spy networks in Eastern Europe. The operation's failure was traced to leaked plans, which only Philby had access to. Another case concerned the mysterious disappearance of agents whose identities had been compromised shortly after being shared with British intelligence. These failures were anomalies that, when viewed in isolation, could be dismissed as operational hazards. Taken together, they painted a troubling picture. Despite mounting evidence, confirming Philby's duplicity proved a daunting challenge. Counterintelligence officers faced the conundrum of gathering admissible proof without alerting the suspect or jeopardizing broader intelligence efforts. Surveillance was complicated by Philby's diplomatic immunity and mastery of tradecraft, which enabled him to detect and evade scrutiny. The British intelligence apparatus itself was divided on the extent to which internal investigations should proceed, reflecting institutional reluctance to confront the possibility of betrayal at the highest levels. The Americans, meanwhile, approached the problem with a mixture of disbelief and growing concern. For many CIA officers, Philby was not just a colleague, but a friend, a symbol of the trusted alliance between two great powers. The psychological barrier to accepting his guilt was immense. Yet as intelligence failures accumulated, so too did the imperative to investigate thoroughly. The CIA, often operating with fewer bureaucratic constraints than its British counterpart, pressed for deeper inquiries and shared intelligence vetting. These investigations revealed a complex portrait of Philby's espionage techniques. He was a consummate manipulator of information flow, adept at exploiting bureaucratic blind spots and institutional weaknesses. Philby controlled access to intelligence, selectively disseminating or suppressing information to shield his activities. His deep understanding of Western intelligence procedures allowed him to anticipate countermeasures and maintain his cover for years. The challenge of uncovering Philby's treachery underscored the limitations of intelligence work, where suspicion must be balanced against operational security and diplomatic considerations. The very nature of espionage, its reliance on secrecy, deception, and trust, created an environment where moles like Philby could thrive. His ability to operate undetected was as much a function of systemic vulnerabilities as personal skill. The investigations also highlighted the human dimension of espionage. Philby's duplicity was not merely a matter of stolen secrets, but a profound betrayal of colleagues and friends. Those who had worked alongside him grappled with feelings of shock, anger, and disbelief. Personal testimonies from intelligence officers reveal the emotional toll exacted by the revelation that a trusted comrade had been a Soviet agent all along. Institutionally, the process of confronting Philby's espionage strained relationships within British intelligence. Divisions emerged between those advocating for aggressive action and others urging caution to protect the service's reputation. This internal conflict delayed decisive measures and allowed Philby to continue operating for longer than might otherwise have been possible. The investigative efforts eventually culminated in a series of covert operations aimed at gathering irrefutable evidence against Philby. These included surveillance, interception of communications, and careful monitoring of his contacts and movements. The Americans played a supportive role, providing technical expertise and intelligence sharing that complemented British efforts. Throughout this period, Philby maintained a facade of innocence, leveraging his social skills and diplomatic immunity to deflect suspicion. His interactions with both British and American agents were marked by a practiced charm that masked the dangerous duplicity beneath. This contrast between appearance and reality intensified the sense of betrayal felt by those who trusted him. The difficulty in confirming Philby's guilt was compounded by the wider political and diplomatic implications. Accusing a senior British intelligence officer of espionage risked damaging the fragile Anglo-American alliance and undermining public confidence in intelligence services. These considerations tempered the response of British authorities and complicated the investigative process. Yet the persistence of American and British counterintelligence officers ultimately prevailed. The accumulation of evidence and the pattern of compromised operations made denial untenable. The task then shifted from suspicion to action, how to neutralize the threat posed by a mole whose position afforded him protections and influence. The case of Kim Philby during this phase of investigation exemplifies the profound challenges faced by intelligence agencies in detecting and countering internal threats. It reveals the precarious balance between trust and suspicion, the interplay of personal and institutional factors, and the intricate dance of counter-espionage in a world where enemies often wear the guise of allies. This period of growing suspicion and painstaking investigation set the stage for the dramatic unmasking of Philby's true allegiance. It exposed the vulnerabilities within British and American intelligence and underscored the high stakes of Cold War espionage. The challenge of confronting a trusted mole highlighted the enduring complexities of intelligence work, where the search for truth often collides with the imperatives of loyalty, secrecy, and survival. The unmasking of Kim Philby as a Soviet mole in the early 1960s sent shockwaves through the intelligence communities of both Britain and the United States, shattering the fragile trust that had underpinned their cooperation. The revelation was not merely a matter of professional embarrassment. It was a profound psychological blow that exposed the depth of Soviet infiltration and the vulnerabilities within Western intelligence. For American agents, the news was particularly devastating, a betrayal so intimate that it challenged the very foundations of their alliance with British intelligence. The process leading to Philby's exposure was protracted and fraught with complexity. Years of suspicion and piecemeal evidence finally coalesced into a compelling case, bolstered by the testimonies of defectors and the accumulation of operational failures that could no longer be attributed to chance. British and American counterintelligence officers collaborated covertly to verify the allegations, carefully balancing the need for confirmation against the risk of tipping off their target. As the evidence mounted, the atmosphere within intelligence circles grew tense and charged with disbelief. Many found it difficult to reconcile the image of Philby, the urbane, trustworthy diplomat and liaison officer, with that of a cunning Soviet agent who had manipulated and betrayed his colleagues for decades. The Americans, who had regarded him as a reliable conduit to British intelligence, were forced to confront a painful reality. The man they had trusted implicitly was the very source of their compromised operations. Philby's exposure was not a sudden event, but the climax of a long and arduous process of investigation, surveillance, and intelligence gathering. British intelligence, initially hesitant to act decisively due to Philby's status and the potential diplomatic fallout, eventually moved to confront the evidence head-on. The accumulation of corroborated information left little room for doubt, forcing the hand of the British authorities. The impact on American intelligence officers was immediate and profound. The betrayal was felt not only as a professional failure, but as a personal affront. One CIA official later recounted the shock that rippled through the agency. "We were betrayed by one of our own, or at least by someone we considered our own." It was a gut-wrenching realization that the enemy had walked among us, wearing the mask of friendship. Philby's defection to the Soviet Union in 1963 was the final act in this drama of espionage and deception. Facing imminent arrest, he fled to Moscow, where he was received as a hero by the KGB. His defection confirmed the worst fears of Western intelligence and symbolized the triumph of Soviet counterintelligence in one of the Cold War's most notorious spy scandals. The defection itself was a calculated move, orchestrated with the forethought characteristic of Philby's career. By escaping to the Soviet Union, he evaded prosecution and secured a prominent position within Soviet intelligence circles. His willingness to abandon his homeland and colleagues underscored the ideological fervor that had motivated his espionage from the beginning. The aftermath of Philby's exposure was marked by a profound sense of betrayal and introspection within American intelligence agencies. The CIA and its counterparts were compelled to re-evaluate their counterintelligence protocols, vetting procedures, and reliance on British intelligence. The realization that their trusted ally had been compromised necessitated a fundamental shift in how intelligence cooperation was conducted. The shock extended beyond operational considerations to the psychological and cultural realms. American officers struggled to process the duplicity of a man they had admired and relied upon. This breach of trust fostered an atmosphere of suspicion and caution that permeated intelligence relationships for years to come. The phrase, "We were betrayed by Philby," echoed through agency halls, a stark reminder of the costs of misplaced trust. Philby's legacy within the Soviet Union was complex. While he was celebrated as a symbol of ideological conviction and espionage success, his experiences also highlighted the human cost of such a life. Isolated from his homeland and former comrades, Philby lived out his remaining years under the watchful eye of Soviet authorities, a prisoner of his own choices, even as he basked in the accolades of his adoptive country. The unmasking of Philby had a ripple effect across the intelligence world. It exposed systemic weaknesses in Western counterintelligence and underscored the dangers posed by ideological subversion. Agencies worldwide took note, initiating reforms aimed at preventing similar betrayals. The case became a touchstone in Cold War espionage history, a cautionary tale about the perils of trust and the necessity of vigilance. For the Americans, the Philby affair was a watershed moment. It shattered illusions about the infallibility of Allied intelligence and underscored the need for independent verification and skepticism, even among trusted partners. The event catalyzed a re-evaluation of intelligence sharing protocols, and fostered a more guarded approach to cooperation with foreign agencies. Yet, despite the damage, the exposure of Philby also served as a catalyst for strengthening intelligence services. The lessons learned from his betrayal informed the development of more rigorous security measures, improved vetting processes, and enhanced counterintelligence capabilities. In this way, the scandal contributed to the evolution of intelligence practices during the Cold War. Philby's defection and the revelations surrounding his espionage activities remain emblematic of the Cold War's shadowy battles. His story encapsulates the profound challenges of intelligence work, where deception is a constant, loyalty is fragile, and the stakes are nothing less than national security. The Americans' shock and sense of betrayal reflect the human dimension of espionage, where personal relationships and institutional trust collide with the harsh realities of ideological warfare. In retrospect, the unmasking of Kim Philby stands as a defining episode in Cold War history. It exposed the vulnerabilities of even the most sophisticated intelligence alliances and underscored the complexity of counterintelligence in an era marked by ideological conflict and global espionage. The Americans had placed unwavering trust in their British ally, only to discover that this trust had been weaponized against them by a masterful Soviet mole, a betrayal whose reverberations would echo throughout the Cold War and beyond. The revelation of Kim Philby as a Soviet mole inflicted a profound and lasting strain on the intelligence relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. The very foundation of trust that had underpinned decades of cooperation was shaken to its core, forcing both nations to re-evaluate not only their counterintelligence measures, but also the nature of their alliance. The aftermath of Philby's betrayal was marked by a palpable atmosphere of suspicion, a recalibration of protocols, and a cautious re-examination of the intelligence sharing paradigm that had once been considered sacrosanct. In the immediate wake of Philby's exposure, American intelligence agencies found themselves grappling with feelings of betrayal and vulnerability. The CIA, which had regarded MI6 as a trusted partner and Philby as a reliable liaison, was forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that its confidence had been exploited by a Soviet mole. This realization sowed seeds of mistrust that would complicate cooperation for years to come. The phrase "we were betrayed by Philby" became emblematic of a broader crisis of faith between the two agencies. The strain was not limited to personal sentiments. It manifested institutionally as well. Vetting procedures, once reliant on British assessments and social judgments, were subjected to rigorous reassessment. The Americans began to implement more stringent background checks and enhanced surveillance measures, reflecting a newfound skepticism toward even the most trusted allies. Intelligence sharing became more compartmentalized, with information dissemination governed by stricter controls designed to mitigate the risk of further infiltration. British intelligence, for its part, faced intense scrutiny both at home and abroad. The embarrassment of having harbored such a high-level mole exposed vulnerabilities in recruitment, internal security, and counterintelligence oversight. The British establishment was compelled to undertake comprehensive reforms aimed at strengthening the integrity of its services. These reforms included tighter vetting processes, improved monitoring of personnel, and the establishment of more robust internal investigative mechanisms. The diplomatic ramifications were equally significant. The Philby affair injected a degree of caution into Anglo-American relations. particularly in intelligence circles. While the strategic alliance remained intact, the mutual confidence that had characterized earlier years was tempered by a recognition of the need for vigilance. Diplomatic exchanges between London and Washington began to reflect a more guarded tone, with intelligence cooperation carefully calibrated to balance openness against security. Moreover, the Philby case underscored the dangers of ideological subversion and the limitations of relying solely on social pedigree and character assessments in evaluating loyalty. The British class system, which had historically influenced recruitment and promotion within MI6, was revealed to be a liability. The assumption that individuals from elite backgrounds were inherently trustworthy was challenged, prompting a cultural shift within British intelligence toward meritocratic principles and a more skeptical approach to personnel security. The Americans, too, learned a sobering lesson about the perils of institutional complacency. The CIA's reliance on British vetting and the informal networks of trust within MI6 had blinded it to potential threats. In response, American counterintelligence adopted a more independent stance, conducting its own background investigations and intelligence validations. This shift marked a departure from earlier practices and reflected a broader evolution in Cold War intelligence methodology. The operational impact of the Philby scandal resonated throughout the intelligence community. Joint programs and covert operations were re-evaluated, with a focus on minimizing exposure and enhancing security protocols. The sharing of agent identities, operational plans, and technical intelligence became more selective, with an emphasis on the principle of need to know. These changes, while necessary, introduced friction into the once fluid intelligence partnership. Despite the challenges, the alliance between MI6 and the CIA endured, adapting to the realities exposed by the scandal. Both agencies recognized that their shared strategic interests necessitated continued cooperation, albeit with greater caution and oversight. The Philby affair became a catalyst for institutional strengthening, driving improvements in counterintelligence practices that would serve the Western alliance throughout the Cold War. The broader impact on Western intelligence cooperation extended beyond the Anglo-American axis. The case of Philby became a cautionary tale studied by intelligence services worldwide, highlighting the vulnerabilities inherent in alliances built on trust and shared ideology. It prompted a global re-evaluation of security protocols, vetting standards, and the balance between openness and suspicion in intelligence sharing. Culturally, the Philby scandal permeated the public consciousness, influencing perceptions of espionage and betrayal. The narrative of a charming, urbane British officer secretly working for the Soviet Union captured imaginations and fueled Cold War anxieties. Literature, film, and media drew upon the story, embedding it within the broader tapestry of Cold War mythology and shaping popular understandings of espionage's moral ambiguities. Within intelligence circles, the psychological impact of Philby's betrayal was profound. Officers became more guarded, relationships more formalized, and the concept of unconditional trust was replaced by a professional skepticism that balanced cooperation with cautious scrutiny. The phrase trust but verify, though often associated with later diplomatic contexts, encapsulated the new ethos that emerged in the post-Philby intelligence environment. Institutional memory of the scandal ensured that the lessons learned influenced not only immediate reforms, but also the long-term evolution of intelligence culture. Training programs incorporated case studies of Philby's methods, emphasizing the dangers of ideological subversion and the importance of rigorous counterintelligence. Personnel security units gained prominence, and the role of internal oversight expanded significantly. The Philby affair also highlighted the intricate interplay between personal relationships and institutional dynamics. His ability to exploit social networks, class assumptions, and personal loyalties underscored the human dimension of espionage. Intelligence agencies recognized that beyond technical measures and protocols, understanding the psychological and social factors influencing personnel was crucial to safeguarding national security. In sum, the exposure of Kim Philby as a Soviet mole precipitated a profound transformation in US-UK intelligence relations. The initial shock gave way to a period of introspection, reform, and cautious renewal. While the betrayal strained ties and complicated cooperation, it ultimately strengthened the alliance by compelling both nations to address systemic vulnerabilities and to approach intelligence sharing with a more measured and secure framework. The legacy of this period resonates throughout Cold War intelligence history. It serves as a reminder that alliances, no matter how close, are susceptible to betrayal, and that vigilance is the price of security. The Philby case remains a defining moment, a testament to the complexities of espionage, the fragility of trust, and the enduring necessity of rigorous counterintelligence in an era defined by ideological conflict and global intrigue. The saga of the Cambridge Five, with Kim Philby as its most infamous member, left an indelible mark on the landscape of Cold War espionage, shaping not only operational countermeasures, but also the cultural and historical narratives that would endure for decades. Their story transcended the immediate shock of betrayal to become a defining chapter in intelligence history, one that illuminated the vulnerabilities of Western institutions and the complex interplay between ideology, loyalty, and espionage. The Cambridge Five's infiltration into British intelligence was not merely a collection of isolated acts of treason. It represented a systemic challenge to Western security during the Cold War. Their success in penetrating the highest levels of MI6 and other government agencies exposed glaring weaknesses in recruitment and vetting processes. The ideological fervor that motivated these men, combined with their social standing and intellectual prowess, allowed them to evade detection and operate with impunity for years. In response to the damage wrought by the Cambridge Five, intelligence services across the Western Bloc undertook sweeping reforms. The British government initiated rigorous overhauls of its security apparatus, emphasizing stricter vetting standards, enhanced surveillance of personnel, and the establishment of dedicated counterintelligence units tasked with rooting out internal threats. These reforms aimed to close the gaps that had allowed ideological subversion to flourish within the very ranks entrusted with national security. Similarly, the United States intensified its focus on counterintelligence, learning from the vulnerabilities exposed by Philby's betrayal. The CIA developed more comprehensive background investigations and fostered a culture of skepticism toward even the most trusted foreign partners. Intelligence sharing protocols were tightened, and the principle of compartmentalization was reinforced to limit the potential damage from future penetrations. Beyond operational reforms, the Cambridge Five influenced the broader strategic mindset of intelligence agencies. Their story underscored the necessity of understanding ideological motivations as a factor in espionage. Unlike spies driven solely by financial gain or coercion, The Cambridge Five were deeply committed to communist ideals, viewing their betrayal as a moral imperative. This recognition led to a more nuanced approach in counterintelligence, one that sought to identify and neutralize ideological sympathizers before they could cause harm. The cultural impact of the Cambridge Five and Philby, in particular, proved equally significant. Their story captured the imagination of the public and the media, becoming emblematic of the shadowy and morally ambiguous world of espionage during the Cold War. Literature, film, and television drew heavily on their narrative, portraying Philby as the archetypal double agent, a figure whose charm and intellect masked a profound duplicity. These portrayals contributed to a lasting mythos around the Cambridge Five, blending fact and fiction in ways that highlighted the psychological complexity of espionage. Philby's life became a symbol of the conflicts between personal conviction and national loyalty, a human drama set against the backdrop of global ideological struggle. His story resonated beyond intelligence circles, influencing popular perceptions of spies and the nature of Cold War conflict. Historically, the Cambridge Five operation served as a catalyst for scholarly inquiry into intelligence failures and the dynamics of betrayal. Academics and historians analyzed the factors that enabled such infiltration, examining the interplay of class, ideology, and institutional culture. Their research illuminated the systemic vulnerabilities within British intelligence and the broader challenges faced by Western democracies in securing their secrets during a period of intense ideological warfare. The case also informed intelligence training and doctrine. Counterintelligence professionals studied the methods, tradecraft, and psychological profiles of the Cambridge Five, incorporating these lessons into programs designed to prevent similar breaches. Their story became a benchmark for assessing the risks of insider threats, influencing the development of security culture within intelligence agencies. The Cambridge Five's legacy extended to diplomatic and strategic spheres as well. Their betrayal complicated Western efforts to present a unified front against the Soviet Union. The damage to trust between allies necessitated a recalibration of intelligence cooperation, emphasizing the need for robust safeguards and mutual accountability. This recalibration shaped Cold War intelligence alliances, fostering a more cautious and structured approach to collaboration. Moreover, the operation highlighted the intricate relationship between espionage and ideology. The Cambridge Five were not mere spies. They were ideological agents whose actions were deeply entwined with the broader geopolitical contest between capitalism and communism. Their betrayal underscored the extent to which ideological commitment could transcend national boundaries and loyalties, complicating the task of intelligence agencies in identifying threats. Philby's personal story, in particular, became a focal point for understanding the human dimensions of espionage. His charm, intellect, and social grace contrasted sharply with his role as a Soviet agent. This duality fascinated both contemporaries and later observers, illustrating the psychological complexity inherent in the spy's life. The tensions between appearance and reality, trust and betrayal, idealism and deception became central themes in the narrative of Cold War espionage. The Cambridge Five operation also prompted reflection on the nature of loyalty and betrayal within the intelligence community. Their actions raised uncomfortable questions about the assumptions underlying recruitment and trust. The British intelligence establishment, long reliant on notions of class and character as proxies for loyalty, was forced to confront the inadequacies of these criteria. The scandal demonstrated that ideological subversion could penetrate even the most elite circles, challenging traditional paradigms. In the broader sweep of Cold War history, the Cambridge Five stand as a poignant example of the espionage battles that defined the era. Their operation revealed the high stakes and profound dangers of intelligence work, where the line between friend and foe could be perilously thin. The lessons derived from their betrayal informed the ongoing struggle to balance openness and security, cooperation and caution, in a world fractured by ideological conflict. Ultimately, the legacy of the Cambridge Five is one of both caution and consequence. Their story is a testament to the vulnerabilities of even the most sophisticated intelligence services and the enduring challenge posed by ideological infiltration. It serves as a reminder that in the clandestine world of espionage, the most dangerous threats often come from within, disguised by loyalty and conviction. The cultural, historical, and operational impact of the Cambridge Five continues to resonate. Their narrative has become a touchstone for understanding the complexities of Cold War espionage, influencing intelligence practices and popular imagination alike. In this enduring legacy, the Cambridge Five operation remains a defining chapter, one that encapsulates the perilous intersection of ideology, identity, and betrayal in the shadowed arena of international intelligence. Kim Philby's betrayal stands as a stark embodiment of the complex and perilous nature of Cold War espionage, a period when ideological fervor, personal conviction, and institutional trust collided with devastating consequences. His story, entwined with that of the Cambridge Five, exemplifies the vulnerabilities inherent in intelligence work and the profound human costs of deception at the highest levels of government. Reflecting upon Philby's case offers enduring lessons on the fragility of loyalty and the relentless challenges of counterintelligence in an era defined by ideological conflict and global intrigue. The complexity of Philby's betrayal lies not only in the clandestine acts of espionage he committed, but in the profound breach of trust he engineered among allies. For decades, he navigated the corridors of British intelligence, earning the confidence of colleagues and American partners alike. His duplicity was a masterclass in deception, exploiting social conventions, institutional blind spots, and the deep-seated assumptions of loyalty that characterize the British intelligence establishment. This betrayal was not a mere tactical failure. It was a fundamental rupture that questioned the very foundations upon which intelligence alliances were built. Philby's ideological commitment to the Soviet cause was a driving force behind his espionage. Unlike spies motivated solely by greed or coercion, Philby embraced communism as a moral imperative, convinced that his actions served a higher purpose in the global struggle against fascism and capitalism. This ideological conviction granted him resilience and determination, enabling him to operate undetected for years despite mounting suspicions. It also complicated efforts to root him out, as his motivations transcended personal gain and were deeply intertwined with his identity. The exposure of Philby and the Cambridge Five underscored the dangers posed by ideological subversion within trusted institutions. It revealed that loyalty is not an absolute, but a fragile and negotiable commodity, susceptible to the influence of beliefs and convictions that may run counter to national interests. Intelligence agencies learned that ideological affinity could be as potent a threat as external enemies. requiring vigilance not only against foreign spies, but also against internal dissent and subversion. The operational fallout from Philby's betrayal was immense. The information he passed to the Soviet Union compromised countless operations, endangered agents, and altered the strategic balance during critical moments of the Cold War. The damage extended beyond lost secrets to eroded trust, diminished morale, and a pervasive sense of vulnerability that reshaped intelligence practices. His case prompted rigorous reforms in counterintelligence, personnel vetting, and interagency cooperation that aimed to prevent similar breaches in the future. At a psychological level, the betrayal inflicted deep wounds on those who had trusted Philby. The sense of personal and professional betrayal was acute among British and American officers who had counted him as a friend and ally. This breach of trust fostered a culture of suspicion and caution that influenced intelligence relationships for decades. The phrase "we were betrayed by Philby" became a somber refrain, encapsulating the shock and disillusionment that rippled through the intelligence community. Philby's defection to the Soviet Union was a dramatic denouement that symbolized both his unwavering commitment to his cause and the ultimate cost of his duplicity. Living out his remaining years under Soviet protection, he became a figure of both admiration and tragedy, a man celebrated as a hero by his adopted country, yet forever marked by the consequences of his betrayal. His life story encapsulates the paradoxes of espionage, heroism and treachery, conviction and deceit, loyalty and betrayal, intertwined in a complex human drama. The legacy of Philby's case extends beyond its immediate historical context. It serves as a cautionary tale about the vulnerabilities of intelligence systems and the necessity of constant vigilance. It highlights the intricate interplay between ideology, identity, and loyalty, reminding us that the human dimension of espionage is as critical as the technical and operational. Intelligence agencies continue to grapple with these lessons, recognizing that the challenges Philby embodied remain relevant in contemporary security environments. Moreover, Philby's story illuminates the broader dynamics of the Cold War itself, a conflict not only of armies and ideologies, but of shadows and secrets. His betrayal exemplifies how the battle for influence and information was waged in the hidden recesses of government and society, where trust was both a weapon and a vulnerability. The Cold War's legacy of espionage is inseparable from stories like Philby's, which reveal the human costs and moral complexities of this global struggle. Reflecting on Philby's case also invites a deeper understanding of the nature of loyalty and betrayal. His actions challenge simplistic dichotomies, revealing the nuanced motivations and contradictions that characterize human behavior in high-stakes environments. The tension between personal belief and institutional allegiance, between ideological commitment and national loyalty, lies at the heart of his story and continues to resonate in discussions of espionage and security. In the final analysis, Kim Philby's betrayal is a defining episode in the history of intelligence, a profound lesson in the dangers of ideological subversion and the fragility of trust within Allied ranks. His story compels us to acknowledge the complexity of espionage, where the lines between friend and foe blur, and where the cost of deception is measured not only in lost secrets, but in broken alliances and shattered confidence. As Cold War espionage evolved, so too did the understanding that vigilance against internal threats must be as relentless as the pursuit of external adversaries. Philby's legacy endures as a solemn reminder that in the clandestine world of intelligence, loyalty is never guaranteed, and the stakes of betrayal are immeasurably high. The Americans and British alike learned through bitter experience that in this shadowy arena, trust must be earned, verified, and continuously scrutinized. Ultimately, the saga of Kim Philby stands as a testament to the enduring complexities and dangers of espionage, a narrative woven from strands of human ambition, ideological passion, and the relentless quest for security in a world defined by uncertainty and conflict. His story remains a cautionary beacon, illuminating the dark corridors of Cold War history and the timeless challenges faced by those who operate in the shadows on behalf of their nations.